The crunch of metal, followed by the shattering of glass, pierced the quiet country road as Vivian Klein's sleek Audi collided with the back of an ancient blue pickup truck that had stopped suddenly at an intersection. The impact jolted her forward, her coffee spilling across her cream-colored designer suit. Heart pounding, she sat frozen for a moment, watching the driver's door of the truck swing open. Drew Sanders stepped out, his weathered work boots hitting the gravel with a crunch. At 34, his broad shoulders carried the weight of a world far removed from Vivian's. He ran a calloused hand through his dark hair, now threaded with early gray at the temples, as he assessed the damage. The back of his truck was crumpled like an accordion, the tailgate barely hanging on. But it was the car behind that concerned him more, its front end destroyed, hood buckled upward like a wave. "Are you okay?" Drew called, hurrying toward the Audi. Inside, Vivian Klein, 32, blinked in disbelief at what she'd done. Her perfectly orchestrated morning had just imploded. Board meeting in an hour, quarterly projections to present, and now this. She pressed a hand to her forehead where it had bumped the steering wheel, checking for blood. Finding none, she pushed open her car door. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm so sorry." "You stopped and I was," she caught herself before admitting she'd been checking her phone. "I wasn't paying proper attention." Drew's assessment was quick and thorough. "As long as you're not hurt, that's what matters, Daddy," a small voice called from the truck. Drew turned immediately. "It's okay, Emma. Stay there, sweetheart." Vivian noticed for the first time the little girl's face peering anxiously through the rear window of the truck's cab. 7, maybe 8 years old, with the same deep brown eyes as her father. "Is she all right?" Vivian asked, guilt washing over her. "She's fine. The impact was all in the bed of the truck." Drew glanced back at his vehicle, wincing slightly. "Can't say the same for your car, though." Vivian's gaze followed his. Her Audi, a $90,000 vehicle she'd purchased just 3 months ago, looked devastated. Steam hissed from beneath the crumpled hood, and fluid dripped onto the pavement. "I should call the police," she said, reaching for her phone. Drew nodded, walking back to check on Emma. Vivian heard him reassuring his daughter while she dialed. She watched as he unbuckled the child and lifted her from the truck, his movements gentle despite his rugged appearance. The little girl clung to her father, face buried in his neck. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, the officer took statements and information. Vivian admitted fault immediately. The exchange of insurance information brought the first flicker of real concern to Drew's face. "My insurance." He began, then glanced at Emma, who was sitting on a nearby guardrail, swinging her legs. He lowered his voice. "It's the minimum, liability only." Vivian understood immediately. His ancient truck probably wasn't worth comprehensive coverage. "Don't worry about my car, my insurance will cover it." "But your deductible?" Drew asked. She waved a dismissive hand. "I'll handle it." The officer finished his report and arranged for Vivian's car to be towed. Drew's truck was dented but still drivable. As the tow truck loaded her Audi, Vivian found herself facing a problem. She was 15 miles from downtown, where her office waited. "Need a ride?" Drew offered, seeing her dilemma. Vivian hesitated, glancing at his battered truck, then at her watch. "Actually, yes, if it's not too much trouble. Least I can do. You're being pretty decent about all this." Drew gestured toward his truck. "It's not what you're used to, but it runs." Emma had already climbed back into the passenger seat, eyeing Vivian with curiosity. "You can sit in the middle," she offered generously. The cab was cramped. Vivian sat awkwardly between father and daughter, acutely aware of Drew's presence, the clean smell of soap mixed with something earthy, the way his worn jeans brushed against her designer skirt. Her world of corporate mergers and million-dollar deals suddenly felt very distant. "So what do you do besides crash into innocent trucks?" Drew asked, a hint of teasing in his voice as he pulled back onto the road. "I'm the CFO of Horizon Innovations," she replied, then seeing his blank expression, added, "I manage the financial operations of a tech company." "Sounds important," he said, navigating a turn. "Daddy builds things," Emma chimed in. "Big things like houses and small things like my dollhouse." "I'm a carpenter," Drew clarified. "Nothing as impressive as what you do, I'm sure." "Craftsmanship is impressive," Vivian replied, surprising herself with her sincerity. Creating something tangible has always seemed more real than moving numbers around spreadsheets. Drew glanced at her, reassessing. That's a generous way of looking at it. Is your office in that tall glass building? Emma asked, pointing toward the skyline coming into view. The one with the curved top, yes. Wow, you must be rich, Emma, Drew admonished gently. It's all right, Vivian laughed. I do well enough, Emma. What she didn't say was that her net worth had recently crossed the 8-figure mark. At 32, she was one of the youngest female executives in the city, having climbed the corporate ladder with single-minded determination after earning her MBA. She'd been profiled in business magazines and featured on 30 under 30 lists before aging out. What those profiles never mentioned was how empty her penthouse apartment felt when she returned each night. As they approached downtown, Vivian directed Drew to her building. He whistled low as they pulled up to the gleaming tower. Quite a workplace, he said. Thank you for the ride, Vivian said, gathering her purse. I'll have my assistant contact you about your truck repairs. No rush, Drew said. It still runs fine. Still, I insist, it was my fault. She handed him her business card, their fingers brushing momentarily. It was nice meeting you, Miss Klein, Emma said politely. Vivian, please. And it was lovely meeting you too, Emma. As she walked into the building, Vivian found herself glancing back. Drew was buckling Emma in, saying something that made the little girl laugh. Something about the scene tugged at her, the simple connection between father and daughter, so different from her own childhood with parents too busy climbing social ladders to notice her achievements. 3 days later, Drew's phone rang while he was installing cabinets in a kitchen renovation. The number wasn't familiar, but something made him wipe his hands on his jeans and answer. Mr. Sanders, this is Natalie from Premier Auto Body. A miss. Klein has arranged for your truck to be repaired at our shop. We can pick it up tomorrow if that's convenient. Drew frowned. Did Miss Klein get an estimate? Yes, sir. Everything's been approved and paid for in advance. Drew thanked her and hung up, conflicted. Pride warred with practicality. He needed his truck for work, but the repairs would have cost at least a month's earnings money. He simply didn't have to spare as a single father supporting his daughter and helping his aging mother with her medical bills. That evening, after Emma was in bed, he found Vivian's business card and dialed her number. This is Vivian Klein, her crisp voice answered. Miss Klein, it's Drew Sanders, from the accident. Drew, hello. Her tone softened. Is everything all right? I got a call about the truck repairs. It's too much. I can't accept that. There was a pause. It's my responsibility. I caused the damage. Your insurance would have covered the basics. This shop, they mentioned they're top tier. They do restorations on classic cars. I wanted to make sure it was done right, Vivian said. Your truck is your livelihood. Drew paced his small living room. I appreciate that, but I can't be in debt to you like this. It's not a debt, it's making things right. It feels like charity. Another pause. Would it make you feel better if we discussed it in person? I could meet you for coffee tomorrow. Drew hesitated. I have Emma after school. She's welcome too. There's a cafe near the Children's Museum with excellent hot chocolate. And so Drew found himself the next afternoon sitting across from Vivian Klein in a cafe that was far nicer than his usual haunts. Emma had spotted the museum across the street and was pressing her nose to the window, dreaming of exhibits she'd only heard about from classmates. Vivian looked different today in jeans and a simple sweater, her dark hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back in the severe style she'd worn the day of the accident. Without the designer suit and the crisis context, Drew was suddenly very aware of how attractive she was. Thank you for meeting me, Vivian said, stirring her latte. I understand your hesitation about the repairs. Drew nodded. I'm not comfortable with handouts. I've always taken care of things myself. It's not a handout when I'm responsible for the damage, she countered. But I respect your position. What if we compromise? I'm listening. Let me cover the repairs as planned and you can. She glanced around, thinking, you mentioned you're a carpenter. I actually need some work done on my place. Drew raised an eyebrow. You live in that glass tower too? No, she laughed. I have a penthouse downtown, but I also bought an old Victorian house last year. It needs extensive renovation and I haven't found the right craftsman. "And you think I'm that craftsman?" Drew asked skeptically. "I saw the dollhouse Emma mentioned. She showed me pictures on your phone while you were speaking with the officer. Your work is exceptional." Drew felt a flash of warmth at the compliment. "I'd need to see the house first." "Of course. Are you free this weekend?" Before Drew could answer, Emma bounded back to the table. "Daddy, they have a real space exhibit with a piece of the moon. Can we go see it?" "Please?" Drew glanced at the museum, then at his daughter's hopeful face. The admission fees were steep, something he'd been saving for as a birthday treat. "Not today, Em, maybe for your birthday next month." Vivian watched the exchange, noting Emma's poorly disguised disappointment and Drew's regretful expression. "Actually," she said casually, "I have a membership that allows guests. I was thinking of visiting the new exhibit myself. Would you two like to join me?" Emma's eyes widened. "Really?" Drew started to decline, but Vivian added, "It would give us a chance to discuss the house project further." He recognized the graceful way she'd framed it as a business meeting rather than charity. For Emma's sake, he nodded. "That would be nice, thank you." The afternoon shifted into something unexpected. Watching Emma's excitement as she explored the exhibits, Drew found himself repeatedly glancing at Vivian, surprised by how she engaged with his daughter, asking thoughtful questions, listening intently to Emma's explanations, never once checking her phone or seeming bored. For her part, Vivian was discovering something she'd missed in her driven career path: simple joy. Emma's wonder at touching a meteorite, Drew's patient explanations of how the interactive displays worked, the easy conversation that flowed between exhibits, it all felt refreshingly real compared to the strategic small talk of boardrooms. By the time they reached the planetarium for the final show, something had shifted. Sitting in the darkened theater with stars projected overhead, Drew became acutely aware of Vivian beside him, her profile illuminated by the cosmic display, her shoulder occasionally brushing his when she leaned to whisper an observation to Emma. As they exited the museum into early evening, Emma skipping ahead with a new space shuttle toy from the gift shop, Drew turned to Vivian. "Thank you for this. It meant a lot to her." "I enjoyed it too," Vivian replied sincerely. "More than I expected. About your house," Drew began. "Tomorrow at 10, she suggested. "I'll text you the address." The Victorian house surprised Drew. Located in an older neighborhood undergoing revitalization, it stood apart from the renovated homes around it, clearly a project someone with vision had undertaken. 3 stories of faded grandeur, with intricate woodwork visible even beneath years of neglect. "This is yours?" he asked as Vivian unlocked the front door. "My impulsive purchase," she admitted. "Everyone thought I was crazy." Inside was a construction zone, some walls open to studs, original hardwood floors partially refinished, a kitchen gutted down to subflooring. But Drew immediately saw the potential: soaring ceilings, a magnificent staircase with hand-carved balusters, stained glass transoms above doorways. "The previous contractor took my deposit and disappeared," Vivian explained, watching Drew examine the woodwork. "The next one wanted to tear out all the original features and start fresh." Drew ran his hand over an ornate newel post. "That would be criminal. This craftsmanship is extraordinary." "Can it be saved?" she asked, and something in her voice made Drew look up. There was vulnerability there, a genuine question rather than a business assessment. "It'll take time, and it won't be cheap," he warned. "Time I don't have with my job. Money isn't the issue." She gestured around. "I bought this place because it reminded me of my grandmother's house, the one place I felt at home growing up." Drew nodded, understanding. Home meant something to her too, despite her success. "I can help. Not with everything. I'd need to bring in specialists for plumbing and electrical. But the restoration work, the carpentry that I can do. Would it be enough to offset what I've spent on your truck?" she asked. Drew did some mental calculations. "Probably 3 times over." "Then we have a deal," Vivian said, extending her hand. "You'll let me cover the truck repairs and you'll restore the woodwork in this place." Their handshake lingered a moment longer than necessary, both aware of something unspoken passing between them. Over the next few weeks, a routine developed. Drew would work on the Victorian during days when he didn't have other jobs scheduled. Occasionally, Emma would join him after school, doing homework at a makeshift table while he measured and cut and sanded. Vivian would stop by in the evenings or on weekends, bringing coffee or dinner, checking on progress but increasingly just to talk. They came from different worlds, yet conversation flowed easily between them. Drew shared stories of his journey as a single father after his wife left when Emma was 2, unable to handle the responsibility of parenthood. Vivian opened up about the loneliness of success, the empty achievement of becoming wealthy while having no one to share it with. One Saturday afternoon, Drew was removing layers of paint from the library's built-in bookcases when Vivian arrived with Emma. They'd been shopping, Emma proudly sporting new sneakers that lit up when she walked. "We brought lunch," Emma announced, holding up a picnic basket. "And I brought this," Vivian added, revealing a bottle of wine. They sat on the floor of what would eventually be the dining room, eating gourmet sandwiches from the basket and drinking wine from paper cups. Emma chattering about school and her friends. The comfortable domesticity of the scene wasn't lost on either adult. "How did you end up as a carpenter?" Vivian asked as Emma explored the house. Drew took a sip of wine. "My dad built houses. I grew up on construction sites, learning by watching. After high school, I tried college for a semester, but it wasn't for me. Came back home, apprenticed with my dad until he retired." "You're lucky to have found something you love." "Most days," he agreed. "When the bills allow me to enjoy it." He gestured with his cup. "What about you?" "Always dreamed of being a CFO," Vivian laughed. "Hardly. I wanted to be an archaeologist as a kid, dig up dinosaurs." "What changed?" "Practicality, expectations." She shrugged. "My parents had a very clear idea of success. After my first year of college, I switched from anthropology to finance. Turns out I have a knack for numbers and strategy. But not passion for it. I'm good at it," she deflected. "Being good at something has its own satisfaction." Drew studied her. "But this house is your passion project." "Maybe," she admitted. "Or maybe it's just an expensive hobby to fill my free time." "I don't buy that," Drew said, his voice gentle. "I've seen how you look at this place. It matters to you." The honesty between them felt dangerous and exhilarating. Vivian found herself wanting to tell Drew things she'd never shared with anyone about the childhood spent in the shadow of ambitious parents, the relationships sacrificed for career advancement, the growing emptiness of achievement without connection. Instead, she asked about the restoration, and Drew explained his plans for bringing the library woodwork back to its original glory. His hands moved expressively as he talked about techniques and materials, and Vivian found herself watching his fingers strong, capable, gentle in their precision. The afternoon stretched into evening. They ordered pizza for dinner, and Emma fell asleep on a pile of drop cloths in the corner. When Drew carried her to his truck to take her home, Vivian stood in the doorway of the Victorian, reluctant to see them leave. "Same time tomorrow?" Drew asked. "I'd like that," Vivian replied. It wasn't just the house being restored. Something was building between them, tentative, unexpected, complicated by their different circumstances. 3 months into the restoration, Drew had transformed the library and dining room, meticulously bringing century-old woodwork back to life. The project had evolved beyond their original agreement, with Vivian hiring him to continue work on the entire house. Emma had become a fixture at the Victorian, forming a bond with Vivian that surprised both adults. They developed their own rituals, baking cookies in the newly installed kitchen, Vivian helping with homework, weekend trips to museums and parks. For a child who had grown up without a mother's presence, Emma blossomed under the additional attention. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed at Drew's modest 2-bedroom rental, he found himself driving back to the Victorian. Vivian had mentioned working late on a proposal, and he'd left his favorite hammer there. At least, that's what he told himself. He found her in the library, laptop open on a makeshift desk, surrounded by financial reports. She looked up, surprised but pleased. "Forgot my hammer," he explained, though he made no move to look for it. "It's nearly midnight," she observed. "You're here too." She gestured at her laptop. "Quarterly projections wait for no woman." Drew crossed the room, perching on the edge of her desk. "You work too much." "Says the man who's here at midnight looking for his hammer," he smiled. "Caught me, I wanted to see you." The admission hung between them, honest and unadorned. Vivian closed her laptop. "I'm glad you came back," she said softly. Drew reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "This thing between us, it's complicated. Because I'm your client, because our lives are so different. You run a multinational corporation. I'm a single dad who struggles to make ends meet." Vivian stood, bringing herself closer to him. "Is that all you see when you look at me?" "A bank account?" "No," Drew said firmly. "I see someone who stops to help Emma with science projects, someone who remembers how I take my coffee, someone who lights up when we uncover original details in this house." "And what do you think I see when I look at you?" she asked. "A guy with sawdust in his hair and grease under his nails. I see a father who reads 3 bedtime stories because his daughter asks for just one more. A craftsman who spends hours getting the curve of a molding exactly right because it matters. A man who makes me laugh and challenges me and doesn't care about my title or my net worth." Drew's hand cupped her cheek. "I can't compete in your world, Vivian. I'm not asking you to." She placed her hand over his. "Maybe I'm tired of my world. Maybe what I've found with you and Emma these past months matters more than all the board meetings and investment portfolios." The kiss when it came was gentle at first, then deepening with months of unspoken longing. Drew's hands, calloused from years of woodworking, tangled in her hair. Vivian pressed closer, the expensive fabric of her blouse against his work-worn flannel, differences melting away in the heat between them. Later, sitting on the floor of the library with their backs against a freshly restored bookcase, they talked about possibilities and complications. About Emma, about Vivian's career, about the gap between their financial situations that both acknowledged but neither saw as the defining element of what was growing between them. "I don't want to disrupt Emma's life," Drew said. "She's already had enough change." "She's the priority," Vivian agreed. "We go at her pace." "And your work," Vivian leaned her head against his shoulder. "I've been thinking about making changes there anyway, scaling back, maybe consulting instead of executive leadership." "Because of this, because of me?" Drew asked, concerned. "Because I've realized what I've been missing. This house project has shown me there are other ways to find fulfillment. Being with you and Emma has reminded me what matters." The transition wasn't smooth or immediate. They dated cautiously at first, mindful of Emma's feelings. Vivian continued her demanding job, while Drew balanced his regular clients with the ongoing Victorian restoration. They navigated awkward moments the first time Vivian attended Emma's school concert, sitting beside Drew while curious parents whispered about the elegant stranger. Drew's discomfort at a corporate function where Vivian's colleagues sized him up with subtle assessment. 6 months after their first kiss, Drew and Emma's lease ended. The conversation about next steps was complicated. Vivian's penthouse wasn't child-friendly, Drew's pride resisted moving into Vivian's space, and the Victorian wasn't yet fully habitable. What if we all moved into the Victorian? Emma suggested one evening as they discussed options over dinner at Vivian's penthouse. "The kitchen works and the bathrooms. We could live there while Daddy finishes the rest." The adults exchanged looks. They hadn't discussed cohabitation directly, though both had been thinking about it. "That's a big step, Em," Drew said carefully. "But we're already there most of the time anyway," Emma pointed out with a child's practical logic. "And Vivian said the second floor will be done next week." "She has a point," Vivian said. "The house is more livable than not at this stage." "It's your house," Drew reminded her. Vivian reached for his hand across the table. "It could be our house, all of us." Emma beamed. "See, problem solved." It wasn't that simple, of course. There were long conversations after Emma went to bed about finances, about parenting roles, about the future. Drew's pride and independence warred with his growing love for Vivian and the life they were building. Vivian wrestled with shifting her identity from career-focused executive to something more balanced. But in the end, they made the leap. Moving into the half-finished Victorian felt right a home they were literally building together. Drew insisted on paying expenses proportionate to his income, while Vivian covered the larger renovation costs. They agreed Emma's routine would remain as consistent as possible, with Drew continuing as her primary caregiver. 1 year after the accident that brought them together, the Victorians' restoration was nearly complete. The third floor remained a work in progress, but the main living spaces showcased Drew's craftsmanship in every detail: restored moldings, rebuilt cabinetry, repaired inlay floors. Vivian had scaled back to consulting 3 days a week, using the other days to establish an educational foundation providing trade school scholarships for underprivileged youth. On the anniversary of their crash, Drew took Vivian back to the intersection where they'd met. His truck, expertly restored, now parked at the same spot where she'd rear-ended him. Feeling nostalgic, Vivian asked as they got out. Drew took her hand, leading her to the exact place they'd stood exchanging insurance information. "I wanted to bring you back here because this is where everything changed. One moment, one accident that could have been just an inconvenience, but instead became the beginning of something I never expected. Best fender bender of my life," Vivian joked, but her eyes were serious. Drew reached into his pocket. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." The ring was simple but beautiful, a vintage setting with a modest diamond, restored rather than flashy and new. "I found it at an estate sale," he explained. "The band was damaged. I repaired it myself." "It's perfect," Vivian whispered, eyes filling with tears. "I know I can't give you the luxuries you're used to," Drew began. Vivian placed her fingers against his lips. "You've given me everything I was missing: a partnership, a family. A home that's more than just an address." "Is that a yes?" he asked when she removed her hand. "Yes," she said simply. Emma, watching from the truck, cheered and ran to join them, throwing her arms around both adults. As Drew slipped the ring onto Vivian's finger, he marveled at how a moment of misfortune had led to this, standing with the two people who had become his world, planning a future none of them could have imagined a year earlier. They celebrated that evening in their half-finished Victorian, eating takeout picnic style in the formal dining room where crystal chandeliers hung above drop cloths and paint cans. As Emma chattered excitedly about being a flower girl, Vivian leaned against Drew's shoulder, her diamond catching the light. "We should frame the accident report," she murmured. "Put it on the mantle as our origin story. Next to Emma's space shuttle from the museum," Drew agreed. "The landmarks of how we became a family." Later, after Emma was asleep, they stood on the Victorians' wraparound porch, looking at the neighborhood transformed by sunset. Drew's arm around Vivian's waist, her head on his shoulder, comfortable in the knowledge that sometimes life's biggest detours lead exactly where you need to go. "I forgave your debt," Drew said softly, "but I never expected to gain so much more than I gave." "And I crashed into an old truck," Vivian replied, "but found my way home." The house behind them stood as testimony to their journey, a restoration of more than just wood and stone, but of dreams and hearts and possibilities. For a struggling single father and a wealthy executive who'd once inhabited separate worlds, it had become the perfect symbol of their unlikely, beautiful collision.